Abandoned amusement parks promise thrills of a different kind. What we found lurking in the shadows of these desolate wonderlands wasn't just rust and cobwebs. It was a chilling glimpse into a world where joy turned to terror.
Pripyat Amusement Park. Ever heard of a town called Pripyat? Well, I'd be surprised to hear that you haven't, as this is a very known town around the world as a very horrible disaster once occurred there. I am speaking, of course, of the Chernobyl plant explosion that took place in 1986. Well, just before the explosion, Pripyat was planning on opening up an amusement park, the Pripyat Amusement Park, and the opening was scheduled for 5 days after the day that the explosion happened. Well, as you can imagine, the explosion was so bad that the amusement park plans were turned upside down. The park owners opened the park for 1 day to try to distract everyone from the horrible disaster, but as you can imagine, as everyone fled, the park closed and never reopened. The Ferris wheel is still standing there today, and there are dark tours that go through the park and the abandoned town. In our number 9 spot, we have Lake Shawnee Amusement Park. Lake Shawnee Amusement Park was located in West Virginia, and it was open from 1926 till 1966. This park ended up closing because it began to hold a horrible reputation, as a few killings happened on its grounds. One accidental, one seemingly not, and apparently others that haven't been confirmed, but nonetheless, this began to make visitors uncomfortable, and so the park shut down. People believe it to be haunted by the ghosts of the young ones that passed away there, but also people believe that the land was cursed from the start, as there was a quarrel between a First Nation tribe and a European settler once in this area. It had a brutal history from 1783, where the Shawnee Native American tribe ended up killing the offspring of the first man that made a home in their area, named Mitchell Clay. But there is so much more to the story, as apparently the park was built on a Native American burial ground, and many young ones were buried there. People believe these ghosts could be haunting the park too, but in any case, no one can deny that the park, even today, feels haunted. In our number 8 spot, we have Joyland Amusement Park. Located in Kansas, the Joyland Amusement Park was one of the biggest when it opened in 1949. 57 acres, in fact. It was doing very well until a lot of ride-related deaths started occurring. Then there was a massive scandal where an employee was killed by some people visiting the park, and that caused a lot of unwanted press. Then an employee was injured by a roller coaster, and finally someone fell off of a Ferris wheel in 2004. As you can imagine, all of these incidents led to lawsuits and eventually financial ruin for the park, where they then had to shut down. Apparently the park was purchased in 2018 with plans to turn it into a concert venue slash wedding venue, but man, I hope they have had like 10 priests bless this ground first before they open it. In our number 7 spot, we have Dreamland Park. The Dreamland Park was located in Pennsylvania, and it opened in 1939. When this park opened, it didn't have too many attractions as you would imagine a typical amusement park to have. The park only had a roller rink, a band theater, a few rides, and a small car race track, and some picnic areas. In August of 1969, though, 2 people by the name of Marilyn Scheckler and Glenn Eckert were killed on the premise, and that is where the park began to have a reputation for being associated with gangs, gambling, and dark dealings. Another killing took place on the grounds in the 90s, and that is what led to the published non-fiction novel about the park. In our number 6 spot, we have the Magic Harbor Park. Here is another abandoned park with a dark history. Magic Harbor, located near Myrtle Beach, opened in 1954. In 1976, one of the owners and his son were fatally injured by an employee of the park, which resulted in them both passing away. After this horrible incident, the wife of the park owner did not want to continue running the park, so it went into foreclosure and the bank took over. It was eventually bought out again, but in 1984, another tragedy happened where a young girl passed away after falling off a ride, and the park was sued for $12 million. With its poor reputation and now horrible financial issues, the park eventually closed. In our number 5 spot, we have Holyland USA. This is an old Christian theme park, as you may have deduced from the title. Holyland. It opened in 1960, and apparently the theme park contained replicas of famous scenes from the Bible, such as the Garden of Eden, the Last Supper, etc. A large cross was placed on a hill and a big sign with its name on it that is apparently hard to miss if you're driving along Interstate 84 in Waterbury, Connecticut. Apparently the park was a hit and a Baptist owned it. Makes sense. And he originally closed the park in the 80s to work on expanding it, but then he passed away. Nuns of the area were maintaining the grounds, but over the years it got worse and worse due to vandalism and an unfortunate killing that took place under the cross. In our number 4 spot we have Brandywine Springs. The Brandywine Springs amusement park opened in 1886 in Williamton, Delaware, and it was a good example of what you can imagine as good, clean fun. The park had a wooden roller coaster, a train, restaurants, a castle house, and much more. The park was a hotspot until a tragedy occurred when an employee and another male was fatally injured, and this certainly changed the park for good. The park closed in 1923, around the time that cars became more available to the average person, which made it easier for people to travel, and then they would find new adventures elsewhere and not spend their time/money at the park. Apparently the park is in ruins at the moment, but there are plans to put up signs and photographs of where the major attractions once stood so that people that walk through it can learn a little about its history. Well, that's fun. Maybe you're not prohibited from visiting this one. In our number 3 spot we have Kejonuma Leisureland. Once a very popular amusement park in Japan, eventually it turned into something quite dark. It had all of the fun amusement park rides and was beloved by many, despite its ghost stories. Unlike many of the other parks here, the park only closed in 2000 due to a drop in visitors, which is believed to be the cause of Japan's declining birth rate and the economic crisis. However, there is a strange urban legend about the park that is still told today that has urban explorers wanting to visit the land. Apparently there is a lake by the park that is known to have a large snake population, and as the legend goes, a pregnant woman who lived near there gave birth to a serpent baby who escaped into the water, and every night the woman would hear the baby cry. It drove her mad, and she ended up taking her own life in the lake, and it was her ghost that people believed haunted the park. Dark. People have reported hearing her and her serpent baby's cries. In our number 2 spot we have Rocky Point Amusement Park. Rocky Point Amusement Park, located in Warwick, Rhode Island, opened in 1847 and didn't close till 1995. It had a long history of over 150 years of being active, and it attracted a lot of very famous guests who performed there over the years. Some of the later guests you would know include Pat Benatar, the Ramones, and a personal fave of mine, the Red Hot Chili Peppers. It only had one killing on site ever recorded, and it was in 1893 when a clinically insane man fatally injured his daughter. The park was so popular that eventually people forgot about the incident. This is one park that would honestly just be sad to visit because it seems like it was so cool. I don't wish sadness for you, so don't go and visit it. In our number 1 spot we have Gulliver's Kingdom. Gulliver's Kingdom, an amusement park in Japan that opened in 1997 near the base of Mount Fuji, is probably the creepiest park I have ever seen. I mean, the park was based off of a book called Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift, and so I bet the park wouldn't feel as creepy for people that have read the book. The park famously had a giant lying on its back, a picture that we can assume is taken from the book. The park existed for only about 10 years before it closed due to the park just not resonating with the people as the owners thought it would. Honestly, an idea like this feels too big for the 90s. People are way more open now creatively, so I bet it would be a hit these days. Instagram was invented a little too late. At this point the park has been demolished, so it's no longer a site for urban explorers, but the pictures of this very chilling park will live on in our brains for.
Starting off this countdown we have Rye Playland. Located in Rye, New York, Playland, otherwise known as Rye Playland, was built in 1928 and has a variety of rides for everyone. But I should mention that these rides aren't the safest. Since 1938, a number of different accidents have occurred at the park. In 2004, a young guest was thrown from a ride and died. This ride is still in commission at the park. Then in 2005, another young guest was thrown from a different ride and died. In 2007, a park supervisor passed away on another ride. And back in 1998, a girl choked to death on chewing gum after it got lodged in her throat throat while on a ride. But it's not only the rides that are dangerous at this park, it's the food as well. A lot of people get sick off of the park's food. Health inspectors found that they had a problem with rats, chipping lead paint, and birds would defecate over the barbecue areas, meaning bird poop was getting mixed in with the food. No thank you. In our 9th spot we have Schlitterbahn Park. What a name! Well, this park is famous for throwing people from raft rides in midair. You would think that they would get this issue fixed since it happened a bunch of times. But no. In 2016, a boy died after being launched from this ride. He flew off of the ride and hit a metal rod, which decapitated him. The ride is said to be the tallest in the world. Well, when you have people dying on it, maybe it shouldn't be the tallest in the world. It wasn't until 2 years later that the water slide was decommissioned. Coming in at number 8, we have Galaxyland Amusement Park. Opened in 1985, Galaxyland is a theme park located in West Edmonton Mall in Canada. Just saying, I don't trust rides inside of malls. Well, one of the rides in particular was quite dangerous. The Mind Bender. With a name like that, you know it's gonna be deadly. In 1986, one of the screws came out of the wheels in the last car on the train. The car disengaged from the track, flinging guests to the ground. The car then smashed into a concrete pillar. 3 people were killed and 19 were left injured. In our 7th spot, we have Discovery Cove. Located in Florida, Discovery Cove, owned by SeaWorld, allows guests to interact with a variety of marine life. These mammals are obviously held there against their will. As humans, we think we have control over them, but we don't. There are a bunch of examples as to why it's dangerous to interact with dolphins or whales or other wild mammals. But the park ignores these facts and continues to operate. I mean, at SeaWorld in 2010, a trainer was killed after one of the show whales grabbed her ponytail, pulled her into the pool, and swung her back and forth. It was horrific. A lot of people have posted about their concerns about going to Discovery Cove. They're afraid they will be the victim of a vicious attack. In January of 2009, a man died after cutting his toe on coral while swimming with the fish. He was hemophiliac and ended up suffering from septic shock and organ failure. He had to get his legs amputated below the knee to prevent infections, but he still sadly passed away. Then on August 16, 2011, 3 guests and 5 employees were injured after lightning struck inside the cove. On top of that, several park employees have sued the park for personal injuries. Coming in at number 6, we have Coney Island Park. The amount of deaths and injuries that have occurred at this park is insane. In 1991, a car flew off the ride, resulting in 1 death and 8 injuries. In 1996, the bolts on the jumbo jet ride became loose, and the car derailed from the track and crashed into a pole. In 2007, a restraining lap bar broke, causing a guest to fall out of her seat, knocking her unconscious. And now we have the Coney Island Cyclone, a very popular but deadly ride. In 1985, a man was killed on this ride after he stood up and his head hit a crossbeam. Okay, that was kind of his fault, I know, but still, it's scary. In 1988, a maintenance worker died after falling from this ride. In 2007, a man broke several vertebrae while riding the Cyclone. He died 4 days later. The list goes on and on, like it's quite scary. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Kings Island. Kings Island is known as the largest amusement park and water park in the Midwest. But of course, over the years they have had a number of scary incidents occur at the park. The scariest thing that happened occurred on June 11th, 1991. Just an hour after opening, a man fell into a pond, and 2 men died of electrical shock while trying to save him. And they don't even know how this happened. Employees have entered the pond before to remove trash, and they've never been electrocuted. Then, just an hour later, a woman fell 60 feet to her death after her harness malfunctioned on the Flight Commander ride. Over the years, other ride malfunctions have caused a number of injuries all across the park. A lot of them seem to be freak accidents, but either way, the park now has a reputation of being haunted or cursed. In our 4th spot, we have River Country. I know I've talked about this abandoned Disney park before, but it was honestly so deadly, like I just have to mention it again. And it's surprising since it was owned by Disney, right? You think it's like a happy little place. So River Country Park opened in 1976. It was the first water park at Disney World. But over the years, a lot of tragedies occurred at the park, forcing them to close. In 1980, a boy was killed at the park after getting a bacterial infection from one of the pool's water. The bacteria attacked attacked his brain and nervous system, which killed him. Then just 2 years later, another boy passed away at the park. He drowned after coming off one of the water slides. Then in 1989, another boy drowned there. Finally, the park closed in November of 2001. In our third spot, we have Walt Disney World. Yes, I know it's shocking that this one's on the list. Disney World is such a huge amusement park. One of, if not, the most famous park in the world. But a lot of accidents have occurred at the park. Most kept secret by the park so they don't ruin their reputation. Here are just some of the accidents that happened there. In 1979, a 31-year-old woman died riding Space Mountain. She was found unconscious in her seat, but staff ended up sending her on the ride again. A young guest drowned in Cinderella's castle moat, and then in 2003, a guest was killed on the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad ride after it derailed. 10 of the other passengers on the ride were injured. Then in 2004, a worker got run over by a float during the parade and died. We also have the man that fell to death on the Haunted Mansion ride. And one of the most famous deaths involved 18-year-old Debbie Stone. She was a hostess for the musical performance America Sings, but during one performance she got caught between a rotating wall and was crushed to death. It's so sad that these happened at the happiest place on earth. Moving on at number 2, we have Six Flags. So there are Six Flags all over the states, and it's not just one park in particular that's dangerous. No, all of them are. Let's start with the fire in 1984. So in Six Flags, New Jersey, 8 people died inside of the haunted castle attraction after a fire broke out. Apparently, they were so badly burnt that they had to be identified by dental records. Then in 2008, a 17-year-old boy was decapitated by a ride while trying to get his lost hat. Then in 2007, on the Superman Tower of Power in Six Flags, Kentucky, a cable snapped and wrapped around a girl's neck and legs. She managed to get the cord off her neck, but the ride began to descend and it sliced both of her legs off. Surgeons were only able to reattach her right foot. And in our number 1 spot, we have Action Park. Located in Vernon, New Jersey, Action Park has been given a number of different names over the years, like Class Action Park, or Traction Park, or Accident Park. In fact, it holds the title of the most dangerous amusement park in the world. I don't even know where to begin. So for starters, this park opened in 1978 and had mainly water-based attractions. One major problem that they had was that their rides were not thoroughly tested. So elaborate rides were built, but the designers didn't really know if they were safe to use. For example, one of the rides, the Cannonball Loop, got tested with the dummy doll, and it came back with no head. But this didn't stop an employee from testing out the ride. Thankfully, he just ended up with a bloody nose and a bunch of bruises. Could have been worse. But the ride was open to the public anyway. Then we have the fact that most of the park employees were underage and undertrained. A number of rides were very unsafe, yet still in operation. Here are just some of the deaths that occurred at the park. A man was electrocuted while on a ride known as the Kayak Experience. One man had a heart attack when going off the Tarzan swing into the water, and 3 people drowned in the tide pool. Apparently, the waters in the tide pool were so strong that it was hard for even strong swimmers to stay afloat. As a result, the lifeguards rescued on average 30 people a day. This park was actually deadly, but managed to stay open until 1996, when it finally closed because the amount of injury lawsuits was just getting out of hand.
Their closure. Starting off today, we are talking about La Feria. On September 28, 2019, La Feria amusement park in Mexico City faced a tragic accident that led to its permanent closure. A train on the Chimera ride derailed, plunging 30 feet to the ground. This horrific incident resulted in 2 men losing their lives after sustaining fatal head injuries, while 2 women were hospitalized and 6 others were treated at the scene. Shockingly, it was later revealed that none of the park's rides had received routine maintenance. Truly the worst thing you could possibly hear when it comes to a theme park or anywhere with rides. This tragedy prompted the park to shut down for good, which was probably for the best, but it's unfortunate that it takes for these kinds of things to happen before people realize the danger. Despite the closure, however, the site has since been revitalized with the opening of a new amusement park featuring a variety of rides and attractions, bringing back the fun to the area with a hopefully better outcome this time. Maybe a couple safety checks in there, you know? Just ideas, just throwing them out. Next, we are talking about Dadipark. Opened in the 1950s by a priest in Belgium, this park aimed to provide experiences for families that were affordable and unforgettable. It was made for the children of the pilgrims who served at the Basilica of Our Lady Dadizella. It was originally created as more of a playground, but it later turned into a more modern style amusement park that was meant to be affordable for every family in the village. Unfortunately, for one visitor, his unforgettable experience involved him losing an arm while riding on the Nautic jet ride. Following fierce backlash from visitors, including complaints about other safety concerns, because apparently this was not the first time that there had been injuries and safety issues, the park closed in 2002. Now, the abandoned park is a haunting reminder of its past, with only broken rides and an eerie atmosphere remaining. There are plans to revamp the area into a new recreational space, but it's uncertain if these changes will be enough to erase the grim memories of its history. Next, we are heading over to the Williams Grove Amusement Park in Pennsylvania, which is like a time capsule of thrills, having delighted crowds from 1850 all the way to 2005. That's absolutely crazy. When the rides stopped and the gates closed, the park didn't lose its charm. It just changed from bustling to ghostly. The aging roller coasters and carousels still stand, giving the abandoned site a haunted vibe that's both eerie and intriguing. Capturing the spirit of its spooky ambiance, the owners actually threw open the gates for a special one-night event in 2016 on Halloween, letting visitors step back into a world where the echoes of past excitement mingled with the whispers of mystery. But honestly, what more could you want with a creepy abandoned amusement park? Like a Halloween party? I don't know. I'm just saying, that's kind of cool. I feel like I would have gone. Definitely wouldn't have gone on the rides though. Next, we are talking about River Country. So, did you know that even Disney, the giant of amusement parks, has had to shut down some of its attractions? One of the most notable examples is River Country, the first water park at Walt Disney World. Initially, it was a hit with visitors, but tragedy struck when 3 visitors lost their lives under horrific circumstances. One from a brain-eating amoeba found in the water, absolutely terrifying, and the other 2 from drowning, also terrifying. Despite these tragic events, River Country remained open. It was temporarily closed for maintenance, but following a tragic day in 2001 American history, the United States experienced a significant drop in tourism. As a result, Disney decided not to reopen the park, and it has remained closed ever since. The park's story remains a very haunting chapter in the otherwise magical world of Disney. Or is it really that magical, or is that just what we see on the surface? I don't know. Next, we are talking about the Holyland experience in Orlando, Florida, which was more than just a Christian amusement park. It was a blend of theme park entertainment and spiritual study designed to resemble the ancient city of Jerusalem. Founded by Marvin Rosenthal in 2001, this park took visitors back to 1st century Judea, showcasing biblical artifacts and recreations of historical events. However, the park was not without its controversies, of course. Right from the start, it faced criticism and legal challenges, particularly around its attempts to gain tax-exempt status. Critics argued that the park's activities verged on proselytizing, which means trying to convert others to your belief, especially concerning its outreach to Jewish visitors, stirring accusations from groups like the Jewish Defense League. Despite these challenges, the park initially secured a tax exemption in 2005, equating it with museums providing historical insight. Owned by the Trinity Broadcasting Network from 2007, the park saw expansions and added attractions like live shows and biblical reenactments. Yet, financial woes eventually took their toll. In 2020, a significant downturn in revenue forced the park to lay off most of its staff and shut down, leading to its sale in 2021. The once vibrant thematic ground known for its blending entertainment with spirituality is now set for a new chapter under the ownership of Advent Health, marking an end to its controversial yet unique presence in Orlando's tourist scene. Next, we are heading over to the Blue, Bayou, Water Park, and Dixieland in. We are talking about the Extreme Ride in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It was once known for its sky-high thrills, but it became the center of a very tragic controversy. On July 11th, 2010, a visitor named Lindsay Zeno decided to ride the Extreme Coaster. Despite its only 3 years in operation, disaster unfortunately struck during her ride. Lindsay tragically fell 30 feet from the coaster, succumbing to her injuries later. Witnesses reported seeing her attempt to secure her safety restraint as the coaster took a sharp turn which sent her flying. An investigation followed but failed to conclusively determine whether it was a malfunction of the safety mechanism or if it had just never been locked properly. While the park itself remains open to the public, the accident led to the permanent closure of the ride, marking a very somber end to one of the park's main attractions. Next, we are heading over to Spreepark in Germany, which definitely has had its share of ups and downs and a whole lot of drama. Opening in 1991, this amusement park had a brief decade-long run before financial troubles forced it to close. But the real controversy kicked off when the park's owner, Norbert Witt, hightailed it to Peru with his family, bizarrely taking some of the park's rides along for the journey. In 2003, they returned to Germany with a shocking souvenir: 400 pounds of what we'll call booger sugar hidden in one of those rides. Both Witt and his son ended up behind bars, and after his release, he lived right there in the rundown park where his daughter even led tours through the dilapidated attractions. Imagine being able to and this is the ride where my dad hid 400 pounds of cocaine from Peru. That's just crazy. Adding a bit of Hollywood to its history, the park served as a filming location for the movie Hannah, but in 2014, much of Spreepark was destroyed in a fire suspected to be arson, adding yet another dramatic chapter to its very troubled existence. Next, we are talking about Six Flags New Orleans, a theme park that captured the hearts of many during its short lifespan from 2000 to 2005, but it unfortunately met an untimely end when Hurricane Katrina left the park submerged under 6 feet of water. The floodwaters lingered for over a month, causing extensive damage and marking the end of the park's operation. Before the disaster, the park was a vibrant hub with 6 themed areas, including zones dedicated to DC Comics superheroes and Looney Tunes characters. Today, the remains of over 24 rides like the Ozark Splash Log Flume and the Zydeco Scream roller coaster still haunt the site. In a twist of fate, the city of New Orleans announced a controversial plan to transform the abandoned grounds into a multi-purpose venue featuring a movie studio, sports complex, and family entertainment center, sparking debate about the site's future and its historical significance. Some people say that just leaving the abandoned park alone is too much, as the remnants are a constant reminder of the devastating impact that the hurricane had on the scene. Next, we are talking about Mimaland, short for Malaysia in Miniature Land, was a pioneering theme park just outside of Kuala Lumpur. Opened in 1975 as the first theme park in Malaysia, Mimaland was a beacon of fun, drawing crowds from all over to the quiet village. From 1975 to 1994, it dazzled as Southeast Asia's first theme park, complete with an artificial lake, a massive swimming pool with giant slides, and even a prehistorical animal kingdom. However, the park's tale took a very dark turn in the early 1990s due to a series of unfortunate events. In January 1993, a devastating drowning incident involving a visitor from Singapore led to the temporary shutdown of Mimaland. The following year, during renovation efforts in the same pool area, a landslide occurred, wreaking havoc on nearby structures and causing mud to seep into the pool, rendering it unusable. After grappling with a host of legal, technical, and safety challenges, Mimaland was unfortunately forced to permanently close its doors to the public by the end of 1994, marking the end of its almost 2-decade run. Today, overtaken overlain by lush forest, the park's crumbling structures and moss-covered statues stand as silent witnesses to its former glory, enveloping the area in an aura of mystery and legend. The winding road to Mimaland, known as one of Malaysia's most haunted paths, only adds to the park's mysterious allure, making it a magnet for those drawn to the thrill of exploring abandoned places. And finally, to close out our list today, we are talking about Mimaland in Seoul, which stands out as one of the creepiest theme parks you can still visit, and it only costs a small fee to get in. The park's branding is a little bit all over the place, which definitely adds to its very quirky charm. Most of the rides are still standing, though they're chipped and have been taken over by nature, giving the place a very ghostly vibe. Despite, or perhaps because of, its eerie atmosphere, it's become a huge hit among urban explorers looking for a dose of adrenaline mixed with a splash of nostalgia. It's not your typical theme park, but it's definitely one that stirs up some controversy and a little bit of fascination. I recommend it.
Alright, let's hop right into it today with the world's most dangerous theme park, Action Park, located in Vernon, New Jersey. Nicknamed Class Action Park, it's home to the infamous Cannonball Slide, which left many patrons with bruises, scratches, cuts, and cracked craniums. When it was first tested using crash dummies, many of them came out dismembered. Luckily, that wasn't the case with humans, but many of them were severely injured on the water slide, which didn't even let out to a pool, but rather a rubber mat. Next up, we've got the Wave Pool, aka the Grave Pool, where 3 out of 6 deaths that took place at the park occurred. 3 drownings took place in the Wave Pool, where lifeguards generally were required to make 30 saves a day due to the waves being too high and lasting too long, and yet they never thought to turn it down. Another water-related death occurred on the grounds after a man suffered a heart attack after dropping into an extremely cold spring-fed pool from a zip line. Not necessarily the park's fault, but definitely still worth mentioning. Another death to occur on the grounds took place during the kayak experience. While going down an artificial river, a man's kayak tipped over. When he got out to flip it back, he stepped on some exposed wire under the water. He was electrocuted and died. While the park claimed no responsibility for the incident, they drained the river anyways. The final death I want to mention was actually the first death to take place at the park, and it was the death of an employee after his plastic cart was thrown from a fiberglass slide and he slammed his head directly into a rock at the end of the ride. You'd think they would have cleared the path. I would say this park scored 10 out of 10 for places to go never. Also, it was shut down, so you can't. You're up, James.
This next incident is why I'm typically pretty wary of rides that are set up and then taken down, like at fairs and carnivals and stuff. So at the time of recording, this just happened last week at the Lambeth Country Show in London. So a fairground ride collapsed, causing injuries to 4 people who were taken to the hospital. Among the injured were a girl, a man and woman in their 40s, and a man in his 50s. Now thankfully, none of their injuries are life-threatening, but this was pretty horrific. At this point, we don't really know what caused the ride to malfunction, but an investigation's been launched. People said it was an absolutely chaotic scene with people sent flying through the air. One visitor said all hell broke loose after the incident.
Next up, we've got Kings Island, located in Mason, Ohio, which is still open but has hopefully updated its safety procedures since 1991. Why? Well, because on June 9th of 1991, 4 people died at the park. The first incident happened after a man fell into a pond on the grounds. 2 people, a friend of his, William Haithcote, and an employee, Daryl Robertson, both 20 years of age, jumped in after the man to rescue him. All 3 were electrocuted, and both Haithcote and Robertson died from the shock. Just 1 hour later, a 32-year-old woman named Candy Taylor was flung from a ride called the Flight Commander and died instantly on impact with the ground. It is now believed that the grounds are haunted and that the spirits on the grounds were to blame for the incidents that took place on June 9th. Many people, including the ghost hunters from the show Ghost Hunters, have reported seeing seeing a young woman in a blue dress sulking around the park and feeling strange sensations while roaming the grounds.
This next story is pretty unbelievable. An incident that could have easily been avoided if there had been more regulations in place. So this is the story of Schlitterbahn water park in Kansas City. So in 2016, a young visitor to the park was killed on the Verrucht water slide after having collided with a pole that was holding a safety net. The ride had been rushed to completion in 2012 to meet a deadline for a reality TV show that was going to be featuring the park. The ride lacked proper safety measures and oversight, and the designers and builders of the ride, including the park's owner, were not required to have any engineering certification. They were enthusiasts rather than professionals, and the ride didn't undergo state inspections. Apparently, Kansas has pretty lenient laws when it comes to amusement parks. I'm not just saying that, apparently that actually is the case. Now, even during testing, the designers themselves weren't confident whether the slide was going to be safe or not. Sandbags used for testing just flew off unpredictably, so it didn't look good, and that's why they installed the safety net. But they didn't foresee that one of the poles holding up the net would ever be a problem.
Next up, we have Six Flags Over Georgia, located in Atlanta, Georgia. The park is still open, and so is the ride that claimed the lives of two individuals in separate incidences that took place in 2008 and 2002. In June of 2008, a man named Asia Lee Ferguson lost his hat while riding Batman the Ride, a roller coaster that takes passengers through the streets of Gotham City and into the depths of the Batcave at a speed of 80 kilometers or 50 miles per hour. After the ride, Ferguson, determined to get his hat back, climbed over the two fences separating him and the ride. While he was searching for his hat, he wandered into the path of the roller coaster and his head was taken clean off. While this may sound like user error, a similar incident actually took place just 6 years earlier when a groundskeeper was cleaning the area surrounding the ride. The roller coaster came by and he was hit in the head by the outstretched leg of someone on the ride. The ride was closed for a single day to be inspected before being reopened to the public.
Next up, we have Adventureland in Altoona, Iowa. This next park has actually changed ownership, so hopefully it's in better, safer hands now. 3 deaths have happened at the park though, the most recent being a contractor who lost his life while working there in 2023. In 2016, an elderly man died on the Raging River ride, which continued to operate afterwards, and that was a big mistake because the 2016 accident was not an isolated incident. In 2021, a raft flipped over, trapping a family underwater. This resulted in the death of a boy with his father hospitalized and his brother in a coma for a month. The family rightfully sued the park. And as I said, Adventureland changed hands with new owners taking charge. Apparently they're working harder to make sure everything is safe.
Next up, we have Luna Park, located in Coney Island in Brooklyn, New York City. Home to the Cyclone, a massive wooden roller coaster built in 1927 that has been inducted into the National Registry of Historic Places, is still operative today and is responsible for the deaths of at least 3 individuals. On May 26th of 1985, a 29-year-old man was killed instantly after standing up on the ride and hitting his head on a crossbeam of the roller coaster. Just 3 years later, an employee lost his life on August 23rd of 1988. While riding in the backseat of the coaster during a lunch break, the 26-year-old maintenance worker was flung from the coaster and died after falling 30 feet and landing on a crossbeam located on a lower section of the track. The ride was closed, inspected, and reopened just a day later. Fast forward to 2007, on July 31st of that year, the last recorded fatality occurred when a 53-year-old man suffered from several crushed vertebrae in his neck that he acquired during his time on the Cyclone. He was taken to hospital and died 4 days later due to complications during surgery.
Alright, next on the list, you're gonna call me crazy, Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida. Yeah, that's right. Putting that one on the list. The most famous popular theme park on the face of the planet. Now, look, I'm obviously not saying the place should actually be shut down. That would be ludicrous. I hope to actually go one day. But What I am saying is there have been some pretty tragic incidents here over the years. There have been 60 deaths at this park, which I was kind of shocked to read. I mean, I'm like, Disney World? Now, for all the people that come through here, that may not sound like a very high number, but 60 deaths, I mean, that's 60 deaths. Certainly ain't nothing. First, there's the risk of death by natural causes. Given the size of the park, the number of visitors, it's really not that surprising that older folks or people with pre-existing medical conditions have died of heart attacks or other health issues while at the park. But there have been plenty of accidents on rides as well. There have been minor injuries and more serious ones. Disney has even faced several lawsuits and out-of-court settlements related to some of these accidents. So, you know, just be a little more careful when you're walking into a park like this. For even as big and famous as it is, still dangers lurking around every corner.
Next up, we have the Fun Fair of Coney Beach, located in Porthcawl in South Wales. If I'm pronouncing Porthcawl incorrectly, I do apologize, but I'm just Canadian. What can I do? Of all the things to do in the small town of Porthcawl, it is safe to say that the most popular would be to visit the Fun Fair theme park fitted with roller coasters and other rides, games, pubs, snacks, shops, and more. While there had been many non-fatal accidents to occur on the rides at the park in the years prior, it wasn't until 1994 that the first death occurred on the grounds, when a young man was killed by a supporting frame that fell onto the tracks of the water chute roller coaster, crushing him to death. More accidents occurred throughout the years, but the park made a major mistake in 2004 when they hired a registered rhymes with Rex offender just 2 weeks after the man had received a court order explicitly banning him from being anywhere near young people. And if that look wasn't bad enough, in 2007, 26 deaths occurred on the grounds of the park during a phenomenon often referred to as the bridge end deaths. 26 individuals took their own lives between the years of 2007 and 2009, all on the grounds of the park, and all but one using a rope. Despite the park's missteps and rocky history, it actually remains open to this day, but I can't imagine it would be all that enjoyable after learning about what's gone on there. I think I'll skip this one, and all of the ones on this list, really. Maybe Disney gets a pass? Don't come for me.
Finally, we have Six Flags Ride of Steel. Yeah, Six Flags is back on the list. Apparently these parks are kind of notorious across the US. Now, one of the rides that's been responsible for a number of tragic incidents, though, is the Man of Steel, or Ride of Steel. At more than one location, mind you. In 1999, a passenger was thrown from the train on one of the final hills at the Darien Lake location in Buffalo. Fortunately, he only had minor injuries though. But then in 2011, a disabled Iraq war vet was ejected from the Man of Steel roller coaster at the same location, leading to his death. Now, in this case, it was an error on the employee's part. The ride restrains passengers at both the hips and the shins. The man didn't have two functioning legs, which was a requirement to ride, but the attendant allowed him to board. There have been other incidents at other locations where the Man of Steel ride is as well, so it seems like they gotta do a bit of work to make this thing a bit safe.
Alright, we're gonna start off at number 10 now with the Pripyat Amusement Park. This is an abandoned park in Pripyat, Ukraine that was meant to be opened on May 1st, 1986. Unfortunately, just 5 days before that date, the nearby nuclear power plant at Chernobyl went into meltdown. Everyone in the area was forced to evacuate the city. As with everything else there, the park was left just as it was. Radiation levels there have been among the highest levels recorded in the whole of Pripyat. Even today, you will need special permission to get even close. Moving on to number 9 now, we have Lake Shawnee Amusement Park. This park in southern West Virginia was abandoned in 1966 after the accidental deaths of 2 children. A little girl in a pink ruffled dress died after climbing into this circling swing set. A little boy also drowned in the amusement park's swimming pond. Some say the park was cursed even before its creation, after being built on the ground where deadly murders took place between Native Americans and European settlers during the late 1700s. The park opens opens up sometimes for tours in the week before Halloween, and some people have sworn they've seen the little girl there in her dress, covered in blood, and just staring at them. Next up at number 8 now, we have Spreepark. This is an abandoned park in Berlin that opened in 1969. At its height, the park attracted over 1.5 million people per year. It boasted a roller coaster, 2 game water courses, a stage, a western town, and an English village. By 1999 though, the park was struggling to cope with large debts. They increased the admission fee, but that only served to drive away visitors. By 2001, they entertained just 400,000 visitors a year. The park closed the following year. In the years since then, a fire devastated major parts of the park. It's thought that someone intentionally did this. These days, Spreepark is nothing more than a creepy, burnt out husk with no certain plans for the future. Next up at number 7 now, we have Six Flags New Orleans. When Hurricane Katrina struck the Caribbean and southern US states, it devastated a lot of places. One of them was the Six Flags amusement park in New Orleans. As you can see from these images, the damage was so immense that the owners were just forced to abandon it altogether. The only visitors to the site now are trespassers who rip fences and leave graffiti. The place is also home to boars, snakes, and other animals that have taken advantage of the lack of human presence. Next up at number 6 now, we have Encore Garden. This abandoned park in Taiwan lies just east of Taichung City. It was extremely popular during the 1990s, attracting visitors from all around. Then, in unclear circumstances, the park just closed. Rumours spread about what the reason could be. Some say there was a serious accident on the huge Ferris wheel that the park was known for. Others maintained that an earthquake in 1999 caused damage that was just too serious to repair. Next up at number 5 now, we have Gulliver's Kingdom. This theme park was built in the shadow of Japan's Mount Fuji and was partially funded by the government. The ride centered around the story of Gulliver, a traveler who discovered an island full of tiny people. The park opened in 1997 but barely lasted 4 years. The reasons for its failure are cited as a lack of main attractions, but also its proximity to the notorious Suicide Forest, a place that earned its name from being a favoured suicide spot for people in Japan. At number 4 now, we have Okpoland. This amusement park is on the outskirts of Okpo in South Korea. It was very popular during the 90s and became one of Asia's most famous amusement parks. The duck ride became a crowd favourite, but tragically people started getting seriously injured on it. Eventually someone died on it. There was outrage and Okpoland offered no compensation or apology. In 1999, a little girl died after one of the duck carts derailed and capsized. The park was closed soon after that. The derailed cart that killed the girl was still left hanging over the edge. It became a popular site for urban explorers until it was demolished in 2011. At number 3 now, we have Dadipark. Built in 1950, this was Belgium's first private amusement park, built for children of pilgrims visiting the nearby basilica. It was successful for many years, but that all came to an end in 2000. The Nautic jet ride was notoriously dangerous, but no improvements were ever made to it. In that year, a boy lost his arm on the ride. The park struggled on for a while, but closed down in 2002 for renovations. For whatever reason, those renovations never took place, and the park was abandoned, never to reopen again. Today, it remains almost as it was left. Parts of it were demolished, but many of the buildings and smaller attractions remain. Next up at number 2 now, we have Wonderland Amusement Park. This park in China was supposed to be the country's answer to Disneyland's Cinderella Castle. It was still in development in 2000 when the plug was pulled on the whole project. According to National Geographic, the developer, local government, and farmers all could not agree on the value of the land, and so work was stopped while the castle was only half built. Despite the owners abandoning Wonderland Park, the locals did not. They still tend to the plants that grow around the castle and apparently use the castle itself as a communal activity centre. And finally, at number 1 now, we have Joyland. This park in Kansas was once the largest in the state and boasted 20 rides for kids and adults alike. It ran for more than 50 years until 2004. That was the year a 13-year-old girl fell from the Ferris wheel and sustained major injuries. The park closed down to assess its own safety. Although it planned to open again in 2006, it never did. The owners have since demolished most of the major attractions
in America. Starting off this countdown, we have Six Flags in New Orleans. Six Flags is a huge American park corporation with parks all throughout the US, but sadly the one in New Orleans has been abandoned. The park opened in 2000 but only lasted a couple of years. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit the park and the property flooded. The whole park was submerged in 7 feet of water for about a month. The exposure to this water damaged a lot of rides, making them unsafe. There wasn't enough funding for all the repairs that that they had to do, so the park was closed. Now it's only used as a film set. In fact, the film Deepwater Horizon and Jurassic World have both filmed scenes there. Moving on at number 9, we have the Land of Oz. Located in North Carolina, the Land of Oz was a park centered around the Wizard of Oz. It first opened in 1970 and featured a beautiful yellow brick road and had an emerald city, and even had one of the dresses Judy Garland wore in the film. However, the buzz surrounding this place quickly died down. Then in 1975, there was a fire at the park that destroyed the Emerald City, and then Judy Garland's dress was stolen. By 1980, the entire park was abandoned. Now you can only visit the park once a year as part of a Halloween attraction. In our 8th spot, we have Jungle Habitat. Located in West Milford, New Jersey, the Jungle Habitat amusement park allowed guests to get up close and personal with the animals. You could do this by walking or driving through a specific area. The drive-through area was supposed to feel like you were on a safari adventure. This amusement park had 70 different species of animals from all around the world. However, there were constant rumors of animals escaping from the park or illegal poachings happening. This, of course, damaged its reputation, but that's not what caused the park to close. It said that Warner Bros. Wanted to make the park bigger, but the residents of the area were not too fond of this idea. In 1976, the park shut down and all the animals were rehomed. However, after the park was closed, frozen remains of several animals were found on the premises, making them wonder what went on there behind the scenes. Coming in at number 7, we have River Country. I've talked about this park before in another video, but I feel like it needs to be mentioned again. River Country Park opened in 1976 and was the first water park at Walt Disney World. The park was designed to look like a swimming hole. It had fake mountains with water slides, and it was a good idea, except a lot of bad things ended up occurring at the park. In 1980, a boy was killed at the park after getting a bacterial infection from one of the pool's water. The bacteria ended up attacking his brain and nervous system, which then killed him. Then, just 2 years later, another guest passed away at the park. Sadly, this guest drowned after coming off one of the water slides. Then in 1989, another drowning occurred. The park closed its doors in November of 2001, but most of it is still there, and it makes for a good place for urban explorers to check out, especially since it's now considered haunted by the souls of the people who died there. Moving on at number 6, we have Bedrock City. Who here grew up watching the Flintstones? Man, that is such a classic cartoon. Back in the 70s, a Flintstones themed amusement park was opened in Williams, Arizona. It had rides such as a giant brontosaurus shaped slide, character statues, and a Flintstones themed diner. It also had a campground if you wanted to stay overnight. But recently, the park changed owners, and well, the new owner had new plans for the park. The park was recently closed just last year, and now this owner plans to make it into a new attraction called Raptor Ranch. Can't lie, it sounds pretty cool. But for now, the park is abandoned and all that's left is a cutout of Wilma standing near the entrance. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Hobbiton. Hobbiton was an amusement park centering around J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. Now, you think that this park would be a huge success since the books were, but nope. It wasn't. Built in the 1970s, this attraction didn't have any rides or games, but instead it was more of like a nature walk, where you could just walk through scenes from the book. And I think that one of the reasons why this park failed was because people want rides and games, something to, like interact with. At this park, you would walk through the story of Bilbo Baggins, and each set had a voice box that would tell you what was going on in the scene that you were viewing. But it was a failed project and ended up closing in 2009. But if you pass by the area, you can still see a sculpture of Gandalf at the door of Bilbo Baggins' Hobbit hole. Coming in at number 4, we have Chippewa Lake Amusement Park. This amusement park was operational for 100 years before closing down. It opened in 1878 and was the hotspot for family fun. In fact, its Ferris wheel was said to be the fastest Ferris wheel in America. I don't know if that's really an accomplishment though, like I can just feel the nausea just thinking about it. Sadly, the park closed down in 1978 because of low attendance. The park was left untouched for quite some time. Then in 2008, a fire destroyed many of the structures. The rest of the structures were demolished that same year. But people really need to stop burning down abandoned amusement parks. In our third spot, we have Prehistoric Forest. This amusement park had everything you could ever ask for. They had a water slide, a waterfall, a smoking volcano, and dinosaurs. Lots and lots of dinosaurs. Built in 1963, this park was meant to mix fun with education. The park was divided into 3 areas. First, you had a safari train ride that would take you through the woods filled with 70 statues of dinosaurs and other prehistoric creatures. Then you had a walking tour led by a guide, and you would learn more about the creatures. Lastly, there was another train which took you through the land of the leprechaun. I know, kinda seems weird, like what do dinosaurs and leprechauns have in common? But this taught you legends from early Irish settlers of the area. The park even had a fossil digging pit, which is really cool. I would have loved that. And entry back in 1981 was only $275 for an adult and $175 for a kid. Man, I wish that's how cheap Disney's tickets were, because if that was the case, I'd be going like every month. Unfortunately, this park closed in 1999. In our second spot, we have Lincoln Park, and I'm not talking about the band here, or an amusement park based on the band. Lincoln Park was an amusement park located between New Bedford and Fall River in Massachusetts. In 1894, the Union Street Railway Company created Lincoln Park to connect Fall River to New Bedford. Lincoln Park was at the end of the trolley line and was originally created as a picnic park. It had picnic tables, a playground, and some grills to make your own food. Eventually, it transformed into an amusement park. It was originally named Midway Park or Westport Park, but was later changed to Lincoln Park. This park was known for its ride, the Comet, which was a 300-foot long wooden roller coaster. But in 1986, a fatal accident occurred on this roller coaster, which kind of scared a lot of people, and they're like, is it really as safe as you claim it to be? Then in 1987, another accident occurred on another roller coaster, but thankfully this time no one was injured. But the park was closed in 1987. Then in the 1990s, a series of fires destroyed 90% of the park and the rides. What's with all these parks catching on fire? Like, seriously. Smokey the Bear is going to find out. And in our number 1 spot, we have Lake Shawnee. This is one amusement park that does not have a child-friendly past. Apparently, the park was built on the site of the Clay family massacre. Basically, members of a family were kidnapped and killed on the land. Whoever thought it was a good spot for an amusement park should have been fired. The park opened in 1926 and was rumored to be haunted. After the death of 2 park guests, the park closed in 1966. Now it's said that the ghosts of the park's victims can be seen there at night. And that's all for today's video. Let's move on to our comment shoutout portion. I'll be shouting out comments from my video, Top 10 Mysterious Fossils That Shock the World. Crystal KO commented, I've never been in the shoutout portions. Is this my lucky day? I think it is. There you go. Here's your shoutout. Thanks so much for commenting. Alyssa Scanderup commented, I love you, Lindsay. Also, I kind of love it when producer Chris speaks up. Hi, Chris. Chris, you got anything you want to say?
Hi, Alyssa.
There you go. Your own shout out from Chris. Other people are going to be commenting now. I want to get a shout out from Chris as well. Venkatish Shanbag commented, you really look like an elf from Lord of the Rings though. It's a compliment, BTW. I'll take it. If I look like an elf, sure. Hopefully I don't have pointy ears like it though, no. And that's all the comments I'm shouting out for today's video. Make sure to comment something down below for a chance to be featured in my next comment shout out. And as always, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to Most Amazing Top 10 for more amazing videos. I've been your host, Lindsay Ivan, and I'll see ya when I see ya. Candy and other artery hardening. Judy Garland's dress was stolen by night. They can get a lot of money for that. It said that Warner Bros. Wanna. After getting a bacterial infection back in the 70s, Flintstone.
Create a video using exactly this script. It's about the darkest secrets in the ocean that you never knew about. Click the video now to find out more and prepare to have your mind blown. See you guys in the next one.